The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by ETA Hoffman. Chapter 8. The Story of the Hard Nut Continued. Now you see, children, so the counselor continued next evening, why the queen had the wonderfully beautiful little Princess Pirlipat watched over with such care. Was she not right to fear that Lady Mousykins would fulfill her threat by coming back to bite the royal baby in two? Drosselmeyer's machines were of no use at all against the cautious and crafty Mouse Queen, and only the court astronomer, who was also privy interpreter of omens and stars, could divine that the family of Pussy Purr had the power of keeping off mice from the cradle. So it came about that one of the sons of this family, attached to the court with the title of chamber counselors, was held on her lap by each nurse, whose duty was to tickle him into contented performance of such laborious public service. It was the midnight hour, as one of the nurses-in-chief, who sat close to the cradle, started up from a deep sleep. All around lay buried in slumber. There was no murmur, a silence as of death, in which could be heard the faint click of a death watchworm. But what were the feelings of the chief nurse when, right before her, she made out a great ugly mouse standing on its hind paws and laying its murderous head on the face of the princess? With a cry of horror, she sprang to her feet. Every one awoke, but in an instant Lady Mousykins, the huge mouse on Pirlipat's cradle, could be no other, scampered off to a corner of the room. The four-footed chamber counselors rushed after her, too late. She had vanished through a crack in the floor. Then, at the noise, Pirlipat awoke, weeping piteously. "Thank heavens!" cried the nurses. "She is still alive!" How great was their dismay, however, when they looked at Pirlipatkin and saw what had come to the sweet, tender child. Instead of the angelic white and rosy curly-haired pate, a thick, distorted head stood on a small, shrunken, crooked body. The sky-blue eyes had changed into green, goggling balls, staring straight before them, and the pretty little mouth gaped from ear to ear. The queen was ready to die for weeping and lamentation, and the king's study had to be hung with wadded tapestry, since again and again he ran his head against the wall, exclaiming in most lamentable tones, "Oh, unlucky monarch!" Now he might have seen that it were better to eat his sausages without bacon, and to leave Lady Mousykins and her kindred in peace beneath the hearthstone. But Pirlipat's royal father had no such thought. Rather, he threw all the blame on the court clockmaker and engineer, Christian Elias Drosselmeyer of Nuremberg. Therefore he sagely gave command as follows. Within 4 weeks must Drosselmeyer restore the princess to her former state, or at least suggest some trustworthy means of doing so, else should he suffer a shameful death under the executioner's axe. Drosselmeyer was not a little alarmed, yet soon he took courage to trust his art and his good luck, and at once set about the first operation which seemed to him likely to be of use. He very skillfully took Pirlipat to pieces, screwed off her hands and arms, and examined her construction inside. But thus he had the vexation of discovering that the bigger the princess grew, the more unshapely she would become, and he could hit on no way of mending the matter. He carefully put the princess together again and sank down in gloomy dejection beside her cradle, which he dared not leave day or night. The 4th week had come. It was already Wednesday when the king looked in with angry eyes and, shaking his scepter at him, cried, "Christian Elias Drosselmeyer, set the princess to rights, or thou must die." Drosselmeyer began to weep bitterly, but the little Princess Pirlipat went on contentedly cracking nuts. For the first time, the clockmaker was struck by Pirlipat's unusual appetite for nuts, and by the circumstance that she had come with teeth in the world. Indeed, after her transformation, she had gone on screaming just till she happened to have a nut given to her, which she at once cracked, ate the kernel, and then became quiet. Since then, the nurses could never be done bringing nuts for her. "O sacred instinct of nature, eternal mysterious sympathy of all existence," exclaimed Christian Elias Drosselmeyer, "thou showest me the gate of the secret. I will knock, and it will open." He forthwith sought permission to consult the court astronomer, and was taken to him under a strong guard. The 2 officers embraced each other with many tears, being devoted friends, then retired into a private cabinet to turn over many books which treated of instinct, of sympathy and antipathy, and of other mysteries. Night coming on, the royal astronomer consulted the stars, and, with the help of Drosselmeyer, also well versed in the same art, drew out Princess Pirlipat's horoscope. This proved a hard task, for the lines of fate became more and more entangled as they went on. But at last, oh joy, it lay clear before them that to destroy the enchantment which had so hideously deformed her, and to be made as beautiful as ever, the Princess Pirlipat had nothing to do but eat the sweet kernel of the nut Crackatuck. The nut Crackatuck had such a hard shell that a 48-pound cannon could be driven over it without breaking it. This hard nut must be cracked by the teeth of a man who had never shaved and never worn boots, and he must hand it to the princess with his eyes shut and not open till he had taken 7 steps backward without stumbling. 3 days and 3 nights did Drosselmeyer and the astronomer work unceasingly, and it was only on Saturday, at the king's dinner time, that Drosselmeyer, who was to be beheaded on Sunday, burst in, full of triumphant joy, to announce the discovery of the means for restoring the princess's lost beauty. The king, embracing him with warm affection, promised him a sword set in diamonds, 4 orders of chivalry, and 2 new Sunday coats. "Immediately after dinner, set about the business," he bade. "See to it, dear engineer, that the young unshaved man in shoes is provided, along with the nut Crackatuck. And let him drink no wine beforehand, for fear of his stumbling when he takes 7 steps backward like a crab. After that he can soak himself to his heart's content." Drosselmeyer was sadly taken aback by the king's speech, and, not without consternation and trembling, he stammered forth that the means of curing indeed were discovered, but that the nut and the young man to bite it were still to seek. Indeed, there was some doubt whether Nut and Nutcracker would ever be found. "Then you must be beheaded after all," roared the king in a lion voice, wrathfully brandishing the scepter above his crowned head. Lucky it was for poor Drosselmeyer that the king had enjoyed his dinner that day, so as to be in good humor for listening to the arguments which the magnanimous queen did not fail to bring forward in favor of one whose sad fate had touched her heart. Drosselmeyer plucked up the courage and represented on his own part that he had duly fulfilled the task set him, and had earned his pardon by pointing out how the princess could be cured. The king said this was all stuff and nonsense, but finally decided, after he had taken a glass of stomach cordial, that both the clockmaker and the astronomer should set forth, not to return without the Nutcracker in their pockets. The man to bite it open, as the queen suggested, must be sought for through repeated insertions of an advertisement in the home and foreign newspapers. Here the counselor again broke off, promising to relate the rest next evening.